Rainy day out there. Thanks for spending part of it with us. We are broadcasting live this morning. I want to welcome everybody who is here at Red Hen Cafe and Bakery, a fabulous place right here off of Interstate 89, exit 9 in Middlesex. We're going to get right down to business this morning, and it is a great pleasure for us to welcome the two major party candidates here running for governor of the state of Vermont. We're going to kick off our discussion here with Republican Brady Brock and Democratic incumbent Peter Shumlin in just a moment. We know the two are coming up in our second hour this morning. We'll talk about this condition Kate. We will welcome your phone calls in a bit, and you can reach us at the usual phone numbers. 244-1777 is our local number in Central Vermont. Toll free, you can reach us at 1-877-291-8255. Here is our format. As I told the candidates, I do have a clock here. We're not going to be totally rigid on the time here, but I will do my best to make this as even as possible. I will cue the candidates if I think the information goes back too long. And I have a series of questions that I have come up with. Also, thank you to all of you that did send me some questions in the past 24 hours. I greatly appreciate that. Let's begin this morning. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here this morning. I want to begin with actually a story that was in the news this week, on which the two of you differ. Online gambling and the idea of taking the lottery to the internet. Let's begin with Governor Shumlin. This is something you support. Why?
Well, actually, I didn't say I support it. What I said was that the legislature directed us to investigate the implications of online gambling for Vermont and what that might do for our current revenue that all goes to the education fund. The lottery last year raised about $20 million to help reduce property taxes for Vermonters and pay for education. Every single penny of the lottery, one of the best kept secrets in Vermont, goes towards reducing property taxes, paying for our kids' education. So what we did was the legislature directed us, and we followed, to have my lottery folks look at the implications of online gambling, what that means for Vermont, and bring it back to the legislature in January. Now listen, this is where I am on the lottery. I support lottery tickets being sold in our small stores because they help generate downtown business and bring Vermonters together. So I have not said I support online gambling. What I've said is we follow the direction of the legislature to ask the simple questions. What does it mean for Vermont? What are the implications of the gaming industry that's trying to remove states' rights? And all governors, we've discussed this as a group of governors of the National Governors Association. And how do we ensure that we protect our rights to get revenue from lotteries instead of having it all go to Nevada, which is one of the proposals of the current federal legislation.
Senator Brock, you indicated you had some real concerns about this. Why?
I have real concerns because we have a significant number of Vermonters who have problems with gambling. And removing gambling to the internet adds a factor of anonymity. It has a likelihood of increasing the amount of gambling that problem gamblers engage in. And in particular, I'm concerned about the use of credit because in order to do online gambling, the likelihood is that one would have to use credit cards. And to go into debt to gamble for people who already have gambling problems is not, in my idea, the best thing for Vermont.
So, Governor, what's it going to take for you to say yes on this?
Well, you know, this will be discussed in the legislative session with whoever's elected legislature and whoever's elected governor. I don't think this is a pressing issue for Vermont. I agree with Randy's assessment. While we have a fine gambling, well, we've all rejected on a bipartisan basis gambling in Vermont. We do have a very well-run lottery that ensures that we play responsibly, and we want to keep it that way in Vermont. So I think it's absolutely correct for the governor and legislature to ask these questions. What does online gambling mean for Vermont? Other states are doing it. What does it do to our current system? And how do we ensure that we maintain a strong community-based game where our stores and downtown general stores continue to thrive?
Let's talk about an issue that I know that you both would agree is relevant and important to Vermont, and that being health care. And I have a separate question for each one of you. Senator Brock, in a letter to the editor from Frank Nicosia, he talks about the plan that you outlined last week. He says that you have repeated the free market myth about the need for quote-unquote abundant competition in healthcare to keep costs down. He goes on to point about the example of Texas, which has a lot of different options for healthcare insurance. And he goes on to say, the state of Texas is a living reputation, Mr. Brock's conclusion. According to the Texas Department of Insurance, there are more than 40 health insurance companies in the state, but according to census data, in 2010, Texas had the highest rate of uninsured at 26.1%. Are you just rolling out old ideas?
Vermont is not Texas, and what Vermont does not necessarily have to follow a Texas model. But what we have seen, and there are abundance examples to point to in other states, is that increased competition and increased choice does a couple of things. First, it provides patients with the opportunity to choose the health care that best suits them and their families. We have ample examples of cost reduction that can occur through people exercising their choice, particularly with respect to the effects of high deductible plans in which patients, in fact, have a stake in the end result. Studies that go back more than 30 years have shown that this has a material effect on healthcare costs for those people and for the healthcare system as a whole. I'm not advocating that we have unrestricted insurance company competition without regulation. Part of my plan of the 5 points that I included also includes sound, reasonable, and responsible regulation. That's the role of government, but it's also, I believe, the role of the individual to make the choices that best suit them and their families, and that's what competition and choice does. I'm also concerned about the issue of innovation, about allowing people to have the choices that they want and also allowing providers to be able to innovate to provide better services to the public. When you have a single entity providing a service, which is where we seem to be going, the notion of getting innovation into the picture tends to evaporate. People say healthcare is different, that it doesn't follow the laws of economics, but we have ample examples in which where there is choice, where there is competition, and where there's the absence of the heavy-handed regulation of the type that we have here in Vermont, that healthcare prices and costs do in fact go down. We look at LASIK surgery, we look at cosmetic surgery. Those do follow the laws of economics. Prices have historically been falling and will likely continue to fall. I think we can do the same thing in healthcare generally.
Governor Shumlin, my question for you deals with how you have dealt with this issue. There was a commentary piece that was written by a physician, Dr. Robert Emmons, who challenged whether or not this single-payer healthcare system idea that you have is the right way to go. He went on to say in his letter, Governor Shumlin shows a consistent pattern of dismissing points of view different from his own, so much so that in this case he didn't even hear that an alternative point of view exists. When serious questions are asked about the potential downsides of his grand schemes, the governor writes it off as doom and gloom. In private life, this might amount to merely an annoying character trait, but as a mode of governance, it leads to catastrophic disregard for the dangerous side effects of policy prescriptions. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure. Listen, I have a lot of respect for Randy. We respectfully disagree on health care. This is one of the areas where we have a very different vision for the future. Randy's plan, that he has outlined, would undo what moderate Republican Governor Dick Snelling did in his last major act in office before he passed away. He passed community radio. It's a simple notion. It simply said that we in Vermont are one community, one family, and you can't, as a for-profit insurance company, come into Vermont and discriminate against someone, charge them 200 to 300% more if they have a pre-existing condition, are older, disabled, or actually need to use their health insurance. They might get sick. That is what Governor Snelling fixed. Randy Brock is proposing that we moderate that or undo it. What that means is, in plain English, if you're sick, if you're older, if you have a pre-existing condition like breast cancer and you survive, your rates could go up 200 to 300% under Randy's plan, which is a disaster for Vermonters that are struggling to pay for health insurance already. So undoing what Governor Snelling did, and then every single New England state joined Governor Snelling in doing that in the subsequent years, to ensure that you're not discriminated against by for-profit insurance companies because you happen to need your health insurance, was a good thing for Vermont. I'm amazed and astonished that Senator Brock is proposing to undo that. That would be the absolutely wrong medicine for a healthcare system that is gobbling up our dollars. This is a gift to the for-profit insurance companies. You bring back in Golden Rule and the rest, and it's a nightmare for Vermonters who are struggling to pay for health insurance right now.
You're going to have you respond to that in a moment, Senator Brock. But first, you didn't really address the substance of the question about being dismissive of other points of view.
I am not dismissive of anybody's point of view. I think that when the 7 mayors stood at the microphone from all political parties 2 days ago and endorsed my candidacy for governor, their message was simple. This guy listens. He listens to our point of view. He listens to all points of view. He gets out of the office and comes in and helps us. I am a Vermonter, born and raised in this state. I think everybody's idea should be listened to and considered. When we talk about healthcare, it's an incredibly complex conversation. We're on the road to the most thoughtful, cost-effective, universal healthcare system in America. It's easy to criticize. We like our critics. We invite them to the table to help us build a more sensible system for Vermont to grow jobs and economic opportunities.
Senator Brock, are you trying to gut community rating?
Well, I think that the governor perhaps has not read my plan in detail, nor has he looked at what it is that we're talking about here. We're not trying to gut community rating. We're not trying to gut the healthcare system. And this myth that he's perpetrating about the rapacious for-profit insurers in Vermont, bear in mind that in the small and middle group market in Vermont, there are no for-profit insurers. The only insurers that are left in Vermont who deal with the small group and the individual market are nonprofits. That being said, the other myth that sometimes comes about is these folks are making multi-million-dollar salaries at the expense of Vermonters, and those salaries are public and they don't fall into that category. The issue of community rating, what that means in a nutshell is this. You have younger people right now who constitute a significant portion of those people who do not have insurance. The reason is because they're at the early years of their earning career. They typically earn less than their wealthier and in some cases sicker, but not in all cases sicker, older compatriots. They also tend to use much less health care than the rest. We have no mechanism right now to provide them with lower rates. And the net effect of this, since they're early in their earning years, is twofold. Either one, they're part of that 7 or 8% who are uninsured right now. The second part is they are those who are in VHAP, who are in Catamount or in other government-subsidized programs because they can't afford health care. This creates that vicious cycle in which they go into government health care programs. Government health care programs traditionally are underfunded, and the state and the federal government do not pay the amount that providers need. The cost shift occurs, it increases the cost of private insurance becomes more affordable, and then as a result, more people drop out of the market. We need to break that vicious cycle. We need to be able to offer health insurance at a reasonable lower rate for those younger people. Changing community rating slightly, it doesn't necessarily have to be 3-to-1, it could be to a lower amount. And bear in mind that those rates that we're proposing are not the unlimited rates that created the Golden Rule situation. What is being proposed and what I'm suggesting is entirely within the confines of the Affordable Care Act, the Obama administration's Health Care Act.
Governor, one of the things that you've said is before that you want to implement a single-payer system, you want to see cost containment happen here in Vermont. Vermont hospital revenues are set to increase almost 6%, way higher than inflation, way higher than what your administration wanted to see. How would you rate the effort of containing costs on the part of hospitals?
I want to answer your question, but I just want to point out that Randy just defended his plan. I have read his plan, and as he went back from the end of his comments, he pointed out that he is talking about reforming community rating, charging younger people less and sick, older, disabled more. He said maybe not 3-to-1. Hey, turn to Vermonters today who are sick and pre-existing conditions, struggling to pay for health insurance, and tell them, hey, your rates are only going to go up 200% instead of 300% under Randy's plan. I mean, that is what he just described.
Well, what I also added, if I may,
Second, to answer Mark's question. Listen, our challenge is cost containment. I think Randy and I agree on that. We have a plan that will implement real cost containment. Our challenge now is, and what I've learned about healthcare over the years working with Governor Dean and many others, Governor Douglas and Governor Shumlin, incremental change does not work. We need to significantly reform the system. In my view, when you try to squeeze the balloon in the middle, it pops out somewhere else. That's why we need to move to a single-payer health healthcare system where we do three things. Use technology so that you can adjudicate your bill when you come out of the provider's office. That saves 8 to 9 cents on the dollar. Second, use that same Green Mountain Healthcare card to give you access, give your provider access to your medical records so we stop duplication, waste, and efficiency in the system. And most importantly and most difficult, to move from a fee-for-service system where we pay providers for quantity of care to an outcomes-based model where we pay them for quality of care. If we can get costs under control in the state, we win on the jobs front. I want to do 2 quick points. First, Vermonters, we care about each other. We saw that in Irene more than anything. We all know that our hearts tell us 2 things. 45,000 uninsured Vermonters, that's wrong. 160,000 underinsured Vermonters, folks who know if they really get sick, that they are facing financial ruin, that's wrong. But with our heads for a minute, let's do the Bill Clinton arithmetic, the math. Here's our challenge. If our healthcare costs continue to rise at the rate that they have over the last 10 years, for just the next 3 years, we'll be spending $2,500 a living Vermonter that we're not spending on healthcare today. Or simpler math. Today, Vermonters spend $5 billion on healthcare. By 2020, 8 years from now, at current rates of growth, we'll be spending $10 billion on healthcare. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but last time I checked, there's 100 million and a billion. I asked where we're supposed to get that money. So, to answer your question, Mark, we will not get real cost containment until we implement our single-payer healthcare plan. The Green Mountain Healthcare Board is designing that system. Until then, as you nibble around the edges, as others have tried to do, I say you won't get real cost containment. You won't get universal access. You won't get a sense of the system.
I'm going to have you answer that in a moment. But Governor Shumlin, you have said you want to see cost containment before single payer gets in, and it's part of your decision-making process. So is 5.8% acceptable?
Listen, 5.8% is better than what it's been, but I want to be very clear about this. I have never said that we will get cost containment from the current system. To get real cost containment, you have to move to the system that we're all working so hard to create.
Senator Brock.
Again, I want to point out, Peter, that I'm not sure that you've read my plan entirely, because my plan does provide protection for that older, sicker individual who will be priced out of the market. An integral part of the reform of community rating includes the establishment of reinsurance provisions, part of the entire insurance picture, to provide protection for that older, sicker individual who would not otherwise be able to afford care. That's an integral part of it. Now, in terms of your projections of doubling the health care costs within 10 years, that's based on some numbers that have occurred in years past. But overall, nationally, healthcare insurance costs have risen only 4% in the past year. They're rising faster than that in Vermont, faster than the national average, but still considerably lower than in prior years. One of the reasons they're rising faster is because we have a system and a structure that doesn't work, and it doesn't work well, and it doesn't work well largely because of the amount of government mandates and requirements that we have continued to layer on the healthcare system. Now, what you're proposing is that notion of driving 100 miles an hour through the fog towards some future that we are still uncertain of. We still don't know how much it will cost. We don't know who will pay for it. We don't know what will be covered. We don't know who will be covered. We don't know whether people can keep their own insurance. We've spent $100 million between what we've spent on Green Mountain Care and on the development of the exchange in the past year. We have, I don't know how many people working on it. We've spent a year doing it, and we know less about it right now than we did when we started. You said initially, a year ago, when this was proposed, that this would save $500 million a year, and now your administration has admitted it's not really going to save anything. It's going to do what we say in Montpelier all the time, result in a cut. And a cut, as defined in Montpelier, is a reduction in the rate of increase in spending. Now, in point of fact, we know that nationally there's already been a reduction in the rate of spending, and your projection, frankly, is fuzzy math.
Brief response.
Wow, there were a lot of things said there, and most of them untrue. Listen, here's the facts. We never said that we were going to contain healthcare costs to reform the system. Randy's correct that healthcare costs nationally have leveled off a little bit this year. I don't personally expect that to continue, but here's really the challenge. If you talk to any business person across Vermont, if you talk to the middle class, they know, we know, that healthcare costs are not sustainable. Our providers know that, our business people know that. What we're trying to do in Vermont is really tackle this issue right so that we can grow jobs and economic opportunities. And Randy keeps saying, you know, what you're proposing, we don't have all the answers. That's true, we're developing them. And it's scary. We don't know exactly where you're headed. What we don't know makes us nervous. And I keep saying, hey, you know, as a governor who has to lead this state, has the privilege of leading this state, has to grow jobs and economic opportunities, I've got to solve real problems. And it's what I know that scares me. It's what I know that should scare Vermonters. This is what I know. We don't have $5 billion at current rates of growth in healthcare in Vermonters' pockets and Vermont's business pockets by 2020 to spend on healthcare that we can suddenly create out of whole cloth. Vermonters, on average, before I took office, were making the same money they were making 10 years ago. We've just seen that number go up. The only state in the country that's seen real income growth of all the 50 states in the last 2 years. But the point is, what we know should scare us. And it does scare business people. It does scare the middle class. They know that 10, 20, 30% increases in health insurance premiums are not sustainable. Randy says that's all fine. I say it's not. A governor has to get tough things done. When you elected me, I promised I would. We're on the right track to containing costs, providing a true single-payer system where healthcare is a right, not a privilege, where it follows the individual, where we get it off business' backs. If we get this done, which I believe we can, we will grow jobs and economic opportunities, and job creators in other states, I believe, will wish that they were in.
One other question on healthcare. One of the things that people do know now at this point, though, Governor, is that your administration has been coming up with different healthcare benefit package plans to present to the Green Mountain Care Board as part of the healthcare exchange. One of them even has out-of-pocket expenses to a patient of more than $6,200. How would that plan be better than what people have today?
Let's be clear that we're confusing two plans here, and so is Randy in his comments. There are two phases to healthcare reform in Vermont. The first goes into effect in 2014 is the exchanges, the $100 million that Randy referred to that the federal government has given us in that bill to implement the exchange. That has nothing to do with Pete Shumlin. That was passed by the President of the United States and the Congress of the United States. We are complying with the law, setting up exchanges. It's going to draw down about $400 million in federal money to help Vermonters who are struggling to pay for health insurance, pay for health insurance. Nothing to do with me. We're glad to implement it. We think it'll help us. That's the $100 million that Randy's referring to that comes with the federal bill. The second piece, phase 2, is what the Green Mountain Healthcare Board is trying to design. That won't go into effect until 2016 at the earliest, 2017 at the latest, and that's what will really save us money, provide universal access, move us to the first sensible healthcare system in America. That has nothing to do with the $100 million that Randy's referred to being spent for the exchange, or the healthcare plan you just outlined.
But you're
That's
talking
all
about
related to the exchange.
You're talking about 5 years of plans, which include a plan that people would pay out of pocket more than $6,200.
That's one of the options in the exchange.
Okay, how would that plan for the next 5 years be any better than what's going on today?
Really listen, the federal bill doesn't solve the problem. That's why we're trying to do it right here in Vermont. Let's be clear about that. Listen, what the mistake that has been made with healthcare reform by people much smarter than me, President Clinton, President Obama, Governor Howard Dean, and so many others is, in my view, that they confuse access with cost containment. We expand access to the uninsured without fundamentally changing the system where we don't have costs increasing at 10, 20, 30% a year, which is unsustainable. What we're trying to do in Vermont, having nothing to do with the exchange, you're referring to the exchange,
right,
is develop the first sensible cost containment system in America, 2016, 2017 delivery system. What you're referring to is the exchange. All the exchange is a place to shop for healthcare on the internet that reflects the current system in Vermont. You can go buy that plan right now in Vermont. The exchange is no different. We wanted to offer choice. That's what the federal bill suggests, and it's a good idea. All that you're referring to is plans that you can buy right now from an insurer, you will go to the exchange to buy, and you have options of what you want deductible to be. Does that make sense with that high deductible? Probably not. If you want to choose to do it, go for it. You can do that under the current plan, you can do that under the federal bill.
Senator Brock.
Let's talk about that $100 million for a second. That $100 million is federal money, and the governor seems to suggest, well, that's free. That comes from somewhere in the Ethernet.
No,
but we are including in that $100 million a portion that also is state money, and that $100 million comes out of Vermonters' pockets as well as the pocket of every other American. We're going to spend a total of $278 million on an exchange that we may keep for what, 3 years, 4 years, until we go to this mythical single-payer system, whatever it is. But ask yourself right now, as you think about what we've done for the past year, do you know any more what we're doing, what we're spending our money on, where we're going, and where we're going to save anything than you did when we first started? I certainly don't. My plan has specifics, and my plan is like the general on the beach at D-Day who didn't get his supplies, who didn't have his reinforcements in place, and who said, I'm going to start the war from right here. And that's what my plan does. We're not where we want to be, but we have to start it from right here. And as a result, I focus on the discrete, the individual drivers of healthcare costs, each and every one of them, and say, how can we deal with them? What specific things can we do, can we put in place right now to lower healthcare costs? Lower healthcare costs in terms of the access, in terms of the insurance, but also in terms of the clinical reforms that we need to put in place. And to do them in a way in which we can measure them, we can test them, we can pilot them, and above all, if they don't work, we can reverse them. Whereas what your plan does is it moves along towards some indeterminate future point, spending huge amounts of money to do it, and then blows up each bridge as we go down the road behind us, to the point that we can't repair what right now is a very good healthcare system. We have an excellent healthcare system in Vermont. The problem is it costs too much, and that's what you should be focused on.
That is what we're focused on, but I just got to respond to that, Mark, if I could. You know, Randy, it takes a lot to make me nervous. It really does, as you know. But when you start talking about starting the war on our healthcare system in Vermont, I just got to tell you, it makes me very nervous. We have a great healthcare delivery system in Vermont. Vermonters love their doctors, they love their providers, we provide quality care. No one should be waging a war from here on our current healthcare system. What we need to wage a war on, or what we need to fix, is the rising, unsustainable cost of healthcare that's going to bankrupt our businesses, bankrupt middle-class Vermonters, and use all the expendable income that business should be using to invest in higher wages, in innovation, in technology, in job expansion, and suck it up into an unsustainable healthcare system. And all I can say is, sure, this is ambitious. Sure, it's tough. Sure, it's going to take imagination and hard work. But if we get this right, which I believe we will, Vermont wins on the jobs front. And what I've said time and time again, and you try to spread fear, I know that's your job in this campaign, but what I've said time and time again is, if the Green Mountain Healthcare Board fails in coming back by 2016 or 2015 with a system that our delivery system is comfortable with, and that actually, and it fails to reduce costs over the current rate of growth, I will not pursue this plan. We will not push send. We will go home with our marbles. But then we have a real challenge, because we're going to be spending $5 billion on healthcare by 2020 that we're not spending today. And I don't see $5 billion in Vermonters' pockets today that they can spend in 2020 on healthcare increases.
Okay, brief response, please.
That's a false choice. The false choice is that we're going to be spending X number of $1 billion in the future based on rates of growth that aren't necessarily the rates of growth that we're seeing right now. That is the epitome of bad math and bad projection and bad statistics. Secondly, it doesn't really address the problem of we don't have just two choices. The two choices aren't just simply continuing to do what we're doing or going to a single-payer healthcare system at some future point, maybe. There are many other things we can do, and those things that we can do can reduce healthcare costs right now. My point is we're wasting a lot of time doing pie-in-the-sky things that may or may not have any future benefit, but certainly do reduce choice, competition, and individual Vermonters' rights to be able to decide what's best for them and their families while we pursue an ill-defined ideal. But what we also ought to be doing right now is addressing healthcare costs systematically. And as I look back over the past year, I can't see anything that we've done along those lines.
Well, all I can say to that, and I bet Mark wants to move on to something else, but all I can say, Randy, is this. I respectfully disagree with you. We're on the right track. And in my view, your plan does one very simple thing. It does say to the young and the healthy, you will pay less for health insurance. But it says to the folks who really need their health insurance, who really need to go to the doctor, guess what? you're going to pay 200 to 300% more for health insurance to for-profit insurance companies than you're paying right now as a return to the pre-Governor Snelling days. It's a really bad idea. And I just close by saying this. Fundamentally, this is where we disagree. You think that the free market works in healthcare. I say if the free market worked in healthcare, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. How it's different than the examples you cite. You keep saying, you go into Costco and you're buying a flat screen TV, and you can go to Costco or you can go to some other store, compare prices, and decide which TV you're going to buy. That works. What you fundamentally misunderstand, in my view, Randy, is healthcare is not shopping for television. You don't shop for a heart attack. You get a heart attack. You get breast cancer. You get cervical cancer. Your first thought is not, where can I go? I'm having a heart attack. Where can I go to get the best cost-effective health care? Your first thought is, with you and your family and loved ones, we got to get to the hospital and get this care as quickly and fast as we can, the best care possible. Right. So the healthcare system does not respond to the free market system. If it did, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in.
All right. We haven't had a free market in healthcare in 50 years, thanks to government intervention. 1. 2, 80% of healthcare that you get is neither catastrophic nor is it urgent. The best companies in America right now are moving much more toward free market healthcare in which there is choice and competition. If you work for Lowe's, for example, which has over 200,000 employees, you can go to a healthcare provider for a variety of services, and whether that's a heart valve replacement or a knee replacement, virtually anywhere in the country, but focus on those medical centers that provide the best care, and typically those that provide the best care provided at the lowest cost. These are facts, and this is where healthcare is going in America.
If you're just tuning in, you've missed a lot so far. We've been talking this morning with Senator Randy Brock and Governor Peter Shumlin. I want to continue the discussion about math. Governor, this morning, 7 days in Vermont Digger are reporting that your claim of 7,500 jobs being created during your administration is mostly false. They say the following. Governor Shumlin's claim that he added 7,500 jobs may have been true in June, but it's not anymore. Using his own criteria, the correct number would be 1,700. We suggest if Shumlin wants to provide an accurate sense of job creation, he shift to the seasonally adjusted measure, which shows an increase of 4,700 non-farm jobs. By cherry-picking the best numbers available, Shumlin exaggerates Vermont's job growth, so we rate his claim mostly false. Your response?
My response is simple. As we know, unemployment rate numbers go up and down, job creation numbers go up and down. I am citing the number that I had available to me, which is as of June. We created 7,500 new jobs since I've been governor. Listen, here's the point. You can't dispute these facts. I took over as governor in a very tough and difficult time for Vermonters. We're still in a difficult time. We have a lot more work to do. But here are the facts. Since I've been governor, the following has happened. We've moved our unemployment rate to the 5th lowest in the nation. As the Department of Labor Statistics said recently, we have more green, clean, high-tech jobs per capita than any other state in the nation. Just last week, it was revealed that Vermont is the only state of the 50 states that has seen income growth in the last 2 years. That's 4% higher incomes than we had 2 years ago. Is that enough? No. Is it better than all the other 49 states? Yes. We're the only state to see income growth. We have the highest growth rate for jobs in all of New England, including New Hampshire. And I keep saying I can do tax policy because I'm the first governor in 50 years that can see New Hampshire from my house, and it doesn't look like Russia. But the point is, we've kept taxes. We have not raised broad-based taxes while we balanced 2 very difficult budgets. We did it the old-fashioned way. That's helping to grow jobs and job growth. So the statistics suggest, and they're not my numbers, that Vermont is exceeding many of the other states, all the states in New England, the only state in the nation to see real job growth, and we're on the right track. Now, do we have more to do? You bet we do.
Let me interrupt you there. Senator Brock.
Well, statistics again. There's a great book written in the 1970s. It's called How to Lie with Statistics. And we, I think, have a lot of copies of that in circulation in Montpelier. Yes, we may have increased some jobs, and the precise number is lower, as Digger and the other outlets suggest. But at the same time, what's happening is the labor force is shrinking. We have fewer people in the labor force in Vermont. And if you look at when the governor took office and look at the number of people who are in the labor force today, it's declining, and it's been declining consistently. that decline is significant. And what that means, among other things, is that young people, when they graduate from high school, when they graduate from college, they aren't even entering the labor force because they're finding that there aren't jobs. There are people who are already here who are leaving and going elsewhere, and that's causing our labor force to shrink. When the labor force shrinks, and particularly when younger people leave, the marginal rate or the average rate for salaries rises because those people are out of the labor force, and that's probably, undoubtedly, one of the reasons why we're seeing this increase. It's not a real increase in job growth. It's a mythical statistic, and we ought to pay a lot more attention to that. We are still rated by virtually everybody who rates us as 45th, 46th, or 47th in the nation in terms of the attractiveness for new jobs. We're listed by a variety of publications as either the second, third, or fourth worst state to retire in. And those things are caused by a Byzantine regulatory structure, a difficult place to do business, a lack of a business-friendly attitude from state government. The governor refers to this as doom and gloom. I refer to it as telling Vermonters the truth, because these are the things, if we recognize what the problems are, then we can move aggressively to deal with them. I started a business quite a number of years ago that was successful. It created a lot of jobs, a lot of activity, and I sold that business ultimately. I don't know if I could create that business today in the environment that we have here in Vermont. And what my goal is to create a business environment, not one in which government grows jobs, but when entrepreneurs can grow jobs and opportunities so that our kids can stay right here in Vermont. That's my focus in this campaign.
You can respond in a moment. I just want to be clear. Did I just hear you correctly? Did you say that he's a liar?
What I said is that you can relate statistics in a variety of ways so that they're cherry-picked and so that they mean different things. I refer to the very thing that you cited in your question, that many of the outlets say that by using statistics selectively, you can allow recipients of that information to conclude things that may not necessarily be correct. That's what I said.
Okay. Was that a yes or a no to my question?
I answered your question. I said that these statistics used in this way can be misleading to the person who infers information from them.
Response?
You know, Randy, in all due respect, sometimes I think you're not running for commander-in-chief. Sometimes I think you're running for pessimist-in-chief. And I got to tell you, I see Vermont differently. I think it's a great place to do business. I built a business here, several of them, with some success. And I can tell you what Mylan Technologies in your home county of St. Albans said to me last week, the CEO. He was up there to celebrate the new jobs, the expansion that we're doing in downtown St. Albans, bringing in more good-paying jobs to Franklin County. And when I sat next to the CEO, I said to him, as he came up from St. Louis, where headquarters are, I said, so how often in Vermont? He said, I don't get here as much as I want. I said, we're so glad that you're expanding in downtown St. Albans. And you know what he said to me? He said, you want me to tell you why? I said, yeah. He said, we could expand this business anywhere in all of our plants, all over America and all over the world. But we're expanding in St. Albans, Vermont, because you have the most loyal, dedicated workforce in Vermont of any of our operations. That is the story we've got to be telling. I've been telling it for 2 years. That's why we're growing jobs. So we can have a commander-in-chief who's a pessimist, or we can have a commander-in-chief who sees a bright future for Vermont. And as a business person, first governor in years who was born and raised here, I can tell you this. No better place to raise a family. No better quality of life. No better place to run a business. No better workforce. No better place to grow jobs and economic opportunities. And by spreading that around the state and the country as I've been doing, we're getting results. People are growing jobs, economic opportunities. All I ask is you give us another 24 months to continue on the good track that we're on.
Brief response, please.
My glasses are clear, they're not rose-colored. And I think it's critically important that we tell Vermonters the truth. We do have an outstanding workforce, and I'm very familiar with Mylan and St. Albans. I'm familiar with many of the other companies that we have here in Vermont who do pride themselves on having a great workforce. But I also look at the fact that every audience that I speak to, and I talk about unemployment, I talk about jobs, I ask, are you unemployed? Do you know somebody's unemployed? Do you have a kid or a grandchild who's left Vermont because of lack of opportunity? And in every audience I've spoken to, regardless of the economic condition of the people in the audience, 60 to 70% of those hands go up. Our job is to deal with that. Now, I wasn't born in Vermont, Governor, but I got here as soon as I could. I've been here for 42 years. I've seen Vermont through its ups and its downs. This is a great state. It could be an even greater state by telling Vermonters the truth and focusing on the issues that are retarding our job creation. That's what we need to do.
And by the way, I just want to say, Randy, we're glad you're here. You've done great things for Vermont, been a great public servant, and I want to wish you a happy birthday, because I hear it's your birthday Friday.
Let's talk about large-scale wind farms. Everybody seems to ask about a moratorium. I want to ask the question slightly differently. Let me start with you, Senator Brock. Would you support capping the number of large-scale wind farms here in Vermont?
I proposed, along with Senator Benning, an amendment in the Senate this past session that would put a 2-year moratorium on industrial wind farms. I'm very concerned about what I see. I've been to Sheffield, I've been to Lowell, I've been up and talked with people in Newark and Derby and Grandpa's Knob about the effect of these large-scale wind farms on the top of our ridges in Vermont. I'm concerned about blasting off the top of mountains to put 400-foot wind towers on top of them. I'm concerned about the aesthetic field of those in a state that depends on tourism for our industry. But much more, as somebody who's been state auditor, I'm concerned about the economics. I don't see the economics making a great deal of sense for Vermont. The governor, in our last debate, when we talked about renewable portfolio standard, indicated that he agreed with me in my opposition to the renewable portfolio standard in the last session. However, what he did say is that he's the one who proposed it in his budget address. He didn't mention the fact that in 2008, he was the lead sponsor in a bill that would have done just that. And that standard is also part of what we're talking about wind. A standard that would move us to 75% renewable energy in the next 20 years, largely composed of unreliable wind and solar energy that is intermittent and non-baseload power in nature. The net effect of which would raise the rates to ratepayers from $300 to $435 million in 20 years. And here's the cost benefit. It would result in a reduction in carbon emissions of less than 3% in 20 years. The question that I have is, does that make any economic sense to put burdens like that on the back of low income and working Vermonters who spend a much higher proportion of their paycheck on energy than do the wealthy, and in return for which give huge tax subsidies and benefits to a small group of renewable energy providers? Right. I don't think that makes sense.
Governor Shumlin.
Randy, you accused me just a few minutes ago of not listening, or I guess Mark suggested in a letter written to the editor, I don't listen to their ideas. I actually just want to point out that you were correct. I did support the renewable energy portfolio. I listened to you. I listened to other critics. I was concerned about what it would do for rates, and we went with a better plan. So an example of how governors have to listen and change and evolve. But let me go to the big picture. Listen, I've had the privilege of being governor of the state for a little less than 2 years. In that 2 years, I have managed 4 major storms that Vermonters have faced together. The biggest blizzard ever recorded in Vermont's history, a year ago March. The floods of April, the floods of May, where, I'm not talking about Irene, in those floods we lost businesses, we lost homes, we lost bridges, we lost culverts. Vermonters saw their hopes and dreams washed away, mobile homes and the rest. And then Irene, which needs no comment, we all know about that. My point is, the biggest challenge that we face as a nation and a planet, in my view, is climate change. I do not believe that Vermont can move fast enough to get off of our addiction to oil, which we buy from countries that mostly don't like it, to get off of our coal burning plants, which are dumping their exhaust right on the state of Vermont, killing our forests and making our quality of life pretty tough, and move to small community generated power. So I believe that that's incredibly important, not only for future generations of Vermonters, but also for job creation. One reason that we have more high-tech green jobs than any other state per capita in the country is because we put our money where our mouth is when it comes to building renewables. Now on wind, this is where I am. Listen, I don't see windmills, wind towers on top of every Vermont mountain any more than any other Vermonter does. I love our mountains. But I do believe that there is a role for wind in Vermont. And I believe the process should work like this. We have a 3-member public service board who does a great job listening to the cases, quasi-judicial, and deciding what projects should go forward and which shouldn't. My Department of Public Service plays a critical role in those decisions. What I have said to my Commissioner, Liz Miller, is the following. If a community who hosts a wind project votes not to have it in their community, I don't think we should build wind in that community. I'm a big believer in local control. In the case of Sheffield, in the case of Lowell, I'm not sure about Sheffield, but in the case of Lowell, I can tell you, the Lowell residents went to the polls, had the discussion, talked in town meeting, local community, the fire station, the town hall about what it meant, and they voted 72% to have the wind towers built in Lowell. I think that makes sense. If a community at Grandpa's Knob or Rutland or other communities vote no on wind, the community that hosts it, I don't think we should build it. So I think we combine common sense, the real challenge of a climate change future that we've got to build our way out of, and smart renewables across the state. We will grow jobs, economic opportunities, and show the rest of the nation, combined with the best energy efficiency program in America, how to use less power and use more small community generated.
Okay, so that's a no on a cap on the.
Yeah, I don't believe we should.
Let me respond to that if I can, please, briefly. Again, we have the issue of false choices. The issue here and question is, do we have a problem of coal and oil-fired electricity generation? And in point of fact, Vermont has the cleanest electric production energy portfolio in the United States. We don't use coal and we don't use oil-fired power plants to produce our baseload power. And there's never in the history of the United States been a case in which a coal-fired plant or an oil-fired plant, if there was one, was displaced by wind and solar energy. All of those plants still remain online and provide backup power. Now, notwithstanding that, the issue of the community being the recipient, what we find with industrial wind is that the communities surrounding them don't seem to have a say and don't feel that they're being adequately represented. When you put a 400-foot wind tower on top of a mountain, that mountain is visible for miles. The effect of the noise and other activities generated by that turbine are felt for miles. They don't stop at a town's borders, and the towns surrounding them are increasingly concerned that they're not being heard.
I got to interrupt. Briefly respond.
I just got to say, I have never heard a Vermonter in the last 30 years say that coal is not a problem for Vermont. The coal that's being burnt right now in America, in the Midwest, you know, it's interesting. The first time I went to a national governor's meeting with the President of the United States, all the coal governors got up and said, Governor, Mr. President, you got to make it easier. Get the EPA off our back and let us mine more coal. Let us burn more coal. New England is the tailpipe to their coal burning. Vermont needs to lead by example. We have baseload power, good, clean hydropower that we're importing from Quebec. We have other sources of good baseload power. The fact is, if we can harness the wind, the sun, our streams, and our fields through biomass and our forests, we will have a bright energy future. We're on track to making that happen. If Vermont leads, others will follow. I think we're on the right track on renewables. Randy Brock wants to send us back 20 or 30 years.
I want to move to the issue of marijuana. You have supported decriminalization. Have I gotten your position correct on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. If your 16-year-old child came to you and asked you if it was okay to smoke pot, what would you tell them?
Well, I would have the same reaction that I would if they came to me and said that they wanted to drink hard booze or any other endeavor. I would discourage them. But listen, I am the father of two wonderful daughters, and I understand that kids don't always do what their parents wish. And the reality is, when it comes to marijuana, we have an extraordinary drug problem in Vermont. It is not coming from small amounts of marijuana. It's coming from FDA-approved Oxycontin and other opiates that are handed out like candy in America and then lead to heroin addiction because the two are absolutely linked. And if you talk to the mayors that endorsed me the other day or any other person working in our downtowns in Vermont, they'll tell you this: crime is up. We have a real challenge with our safety. We're seeing good Vermont kids and others get addicted to opiates at levels that we've never seen before in this state. It's an epidemic, and we have to solve that challenge. I believe we should be using our precious law enforcement dollars to go after the real culprits in our drug crisis. It is not Vermonters using small amounts of marijuana. I believe we should decriminalize small amounts of marijuana, discourage using it, but decriminalize it, and ensure that we use our precious healthcare dollars to fight the real challenges, which is FDA-approved opiates and other hard drugs that are addicting our kids, killing our kids, and making our communities less safe.
Thank you. Senator Brock.
Governor Shumlin and I are in full agreement with respect to the issue of opiates and prescription drugs and needing to have a combined strategy to deal much more aggressively with that problem that's fueling the destruction of our youth and the crime epidemics that we see in some of our municipalities. I believe that we need to combine enforcement as well as much more emphasis on treatment so as to prevent recidivism. Now, on the other hand, when we start talking about marijuana, yes, I agree. I'm not suggesting that we lock up every first-time marijuana smoker and that we take the entire power of the criminal justice system and place it on that teenager, on the one hand. On the other hand, I think as a leader, as a governor, in a state that has the highest per capita usage of with respect to teenage marijuana use, which Vermont does, that it sends absolutely the wrong message for a governor to approach, if you will, an organization that is not interested in decriminalization, but is interested in legalization of marijuana, to in fact act, or at least offer to act, to be the spokesman for that organization and to in turn accept large campaign contributions from that organization. I think it sends a terrible message to Vermonters. I think it sends a terrible message to Vermont families. I do believe that the issue of deferred sentences and other kinds of mechanisms that we already have available to deal with first-time marijuana use is in fact appropriate.
I'm going to talk about Hurricane Irene.
Can I just follow up on that very quickly, Mark? I think it's really important. Randy's correct that we do have one of the highest uses of marijuana among our kids in America. My point is this: as a mom, as a dad, do you want your kids, should they be caught using small amounts of marijuana, with a criminal record on their record that precludes them from participating in a bright future, not going into the military, not participating perhaps in law school, the other challenges that you have when you have a criminal charge like that on your record? I don't talk to many Vermont moms and dads who say to me, hey, you know, I agree with you, Governor. I don't want my kid smoking pot. I don't want my kid drinking. But I definitely don't want my kid with a criminal record that affects their future forever because they make a dumb choice with a small amount of marijuana.
Okay.
That's not what I said, Governor. What I said is issues such as reparative boards, and I said issues such as deferred sentencing, all of which does not result in a permanent criminal record for people in those situations.
It can.
FEMA funding. Senator Brock, did the Shumlin administration blow it with its negotiations with FEMA for money after Hurricane Irene?
Well, it was not their finest hour. If you look at the story that, as we heard it, as to what happened, we heard many different stories from the administration. First, we heard that there was a FEMA contractor who made certain promises to us that then were reneged upon, as we learned in July, when the money committees were shocked to learn that we weren't going to get the amount of money that we thought we were going to get. Then we heard that, well, we had a situation in which we misunderstood the use of destroyed versus damaged in the requirements for FEMA. Then we heard, well, you know, we never knew that we were going to get this money in the first place, and everything's all right, but we're negotiating for the exact amount. So the story kept changing. But in point of fact, we never knew precisely how much money we were going to get. I absolutely agree with that. But what we did have presented to us, certainly on the floor of the Senate, was that we were going to get the same proportion of money that we would get for other things. In other words, 90% of the expected loss. And the shock came when we found that FEMA said that we were going to get something less. Now, at that time, in late July, the beginning of August, I made a request for the administration to look for the email traffic that underlay this. And what I found in the email traffic was a January email in which the Secretary of Administration inquired for the real FEMA, the FEMA Deputy Director in Boston, asking about the state hospital, and the answer came back, I thought was revealing. It said that the decision on the state hospital will not be made for months. The wording is significant. They didn't say the decision about the amount to be paid or the dollars to be paid or the proportion paid. It said the decision will not be made for months. Then there was a February email that came along in which the Secretary of Administration, again, if we relied on the person locally and we were confident with it, why would we go to Boston and ask the questions? Okay. The question was asked.
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
Did the administration blow it or not?
Well, let me finish the answer, Mark.
All right?
All right? And so the question then was one that the administration asked the FEMA deputy director, can you give us a conceptual okay? And the answer was, by law, I cannot. That should have been the red flag to A, alert the legislature, and above all, to create a contingency plan so that if we didn't get the proportion of money that we anticipated, that we had a plan to know how we were going to pay for what we were going to do, or we had a plan to do something that was at a lower scale. That's where the administration blew it. They didn't have a contingency plan. They didn't have a contingency plan until I held a news conference at the state hospital and demanded they create a contingency plan, and that's when they started working on it.
You know, I understand that Randy's job is to try build a case in the next 6 weeks to fire the governor and bring on a new governor. I understand campaigning, I understand services. I would ask this. One of the toughest things that we have all had to do together as Vermonters is deal with the tragedy of Irene. We lost 6 extraordinary Vermonters. We lost businesses, we lost homes. People saw their hopes and dreams swept away by a storm. All I ask is that we not politicize Irene, because if there's anything that ties us together as Vermonters that I've heard, and I'm out talking to Vermonters probably more than any other Vermonter out there, it's this. It was tough. It's extraordinarily painful. We still have people in a lot of pain, but we're united on one thing. We are Vermont strong, and we prove that we can rebuild the state better than the way Irene found us. Now, in terms of FEMA, what Randy has just said is not true. We have worked cooperatively with FEMA. He suggests that we told the legislature things on a Senate floor, things were said that in fact were not true. Listen, when Randy made that charge just a few weeks ago, his legislators from both parties, the chairs of the committees of jurisdiction, Republicans and Democrats, said this: the administration did not tell us anything that was untrue. They told us that the FEMA funding was uncertain, that we're dealing with a big federal bureaucracy, that we have a job to do. And we stand here today right in front of Waterbury, right next to Waterbury. We have a job to do, to rebuild the state office complex better than the way Irene found it, to get jobs and economic opportunities back to Waterbury, and to get us out of the healthcare crisis we're in right now, where we lost our critical care unit at the state hospital in the middle of the night. We have people in very frightening care right now without adequate facilities to deliver them care. Get a state hospital built as quickly as we can. That's what we're doing. Now listen, is it going to be seamless? Is it going to be beautiful working with FEMA? No. But this is what I've said as governor. My job, our job, is to get our due from FEMA. We will. And our second job, and most important job, is get the jobs back in Waterbury, rebuild the complex in Waterbury, bring hope and dignity back to the community of Waterbury that's been hit so hard, and bring the best mental health system in the country to Vermonters who deserve good community quality care with a backup of a good critical care unit. Now listen, for years, governors have been paying out $10 million a year of Vermont taxpayers' money because we had a state hospital who had lost its federal certification. We're fixing that problem. When Randy says we know the contingency, that is absolutely untrue. I outlined the contingencies, we have the contingency. We're doing the right thing, making the tough decisions. Rebuilding Waterbury, rebuilding the state hospital. Randy can sit around and think about it some more. I'm not that kind of governor. I promise you, I get things done.
Are you politicizing Hurricane?
Absolutely not. Again, I'm telling Vermonters the truth. And I think Vermonters deserve to know the truth. And the governor has the outlines, the back of the envelope contingency plan that he outlined a couple weeks ago. But at the point at which he should have had the contingency plan is when we started. Now that's not politicizing anything, that's a fact. Any business that's going to construct $150, $160, $170 million facility, if they don't know where all the money's coming from, need to have a contingency plan before doing it. And I'm not suggesting we delay anything in terms of replacing the state hospital. We have to rebuild the state hospital. We have to do it, but we have to know where the money's coming from. We have to have a plan. And we haven't had a plan until very, very recently, and that plan is still in the back of an envelope in the administration.
Let's talk about the Veterans Home in Bennington. The federal government is about to decertify the facility. There are 137 veterans that live there. This could be a very expensive prospect here for Vermont. Half of the money the federal comes from federal funding, about a $20 million operating budget, half of that coming from the feds. We'll start with Governor Shumlin. What are you going to do about this?
Well, we're doing everything we can to try and convince the federal government not to decertify the hospitals. I just want to start by your question. You said is about to. We're working very hard to hope that they don't.
Well, they say they will.
Well, they haven't actually said that.
Okay, that's what I have here in front of me.
Well, that's why you can't believe everything you read in the press. But having said that, they have not said they will that I know of. What they have said is, we will not pay, they said this months ago, for any new patients, but they have not said that they will stop paying for existing patients. Listen, this is where we are. There have been some problems at the Veterans Home. My team is working very closely with the board of the Veterans Home, Joe Krosick and others, to try fix those problems quickly. We've done so. We fired the folks that weren't providing the good care. So we reorganized administration. We are working with CMS to try to point out to them that we're running a great home for veterans who desperately need great service, and we're delivering that service. So that's the case we're making with CMS. We'll see what the outcome is. But this is what I can tell you as governor. I'm not deserting our veterans. I'm not deserting those who fought for our freedom and fought for our nation and fought for the state of Vermont. So what we will do is, in the unfortunate event that CMS does decertify us, we will find the money to make up the gap. No one's going to be thrown out of the Vermont Veterans Home that needs care, and fix the problems that have arisen so that we can get recertified and continue to operate the great Veterans Home.
Senator Brock.
The Veterans Home is a critical resource. It's a Vermont gem. It supports 137 of Vermont's most vulnerable veterans, and we owe them. We owe them a great deal. It also is a place for some 250 state employees to work. And so there's both jobs, there's a significant effect on the economy of Bennington and Bennington County, and there's also the need to protect our most vulnerable veterans. It has a great Alzheimer's care unit, among other things, and it's a place that I've been familiar with for a number of years. I think that this is a place that really demands leadership of a governor to intervene and to make abundantly clear to all the parties concerned that we've got to get this problem solved, that we've got to focus on it, that we've got to have solutions, and that we have to have a plan. It's great again to say that we'll find the money someplace. Well, okay, where? Let's start finding that money right now. Again, where's the contingency plan? If you run a business and you know that you're going to have a problem down the road, you do that planning right now. You don't do it after the problem blows up. We also had evidently considerable warning that this was a problem that was coming. This is not where we need to be. We should not have had this termination letter issued to us in the first place. If you look at the history, at least has been reported by the press, and I do believe the press in that regard, about the problems as they surfaced. And that, again, raised the question is, where was the administration, the people who are overseeing the Veterans Home during all of this period, to have gotten us to the point where we're now at in effect, the last mile? And I'm concerned about that.
One of the issues that's of great interest here in Vermont to many of us is local food. There have been some significant changes made in the schools on what kids can be served. There's now a program where they're served a vegetable course first. Do you support this changing of the rules in the schools when it comes to food? Senator Brock.
I do. I think that the use of our local food resources and healthy diets is important. I think it's a great program. It's one that I support.
Governor?
I agree with Randy wholeheartedly, and I just want to point out that one of the things I'm proud of in our job growth story is the simple fact that we are leading the nation on farm to plate, farm to fork, locally grown food, getting the value-added product of our farmers, and we're seeing results. Our small farmers are starting to thrive. We have more young people staying in Vermont to farm than we ever would have dreamed of 20 years ago. So I do believe that by going local, by growing some of the best food, getting the value-added product, and state government, my Secretary of Agriculture, Chuck Ross, and Economic Development, working together with our farm community to grow opportunities, our best agricultural days are ahead of us, and we should be feeding more local food to our school kids instead of importing the corporate food that they've been getting.
Last question, though I'm going to make it a longer couple of part one, just because I can then make it one question. Do wealthy people in Vermont pay enough in income taxes, too much in income taxes, or just right? And the second part of that question is, are Vermonters all paying too much in school property taxes? And I'm going to start with you, Governor Shumlin.
Well, all of Americans pay too much in school property taxes for the simple reason that we take our most important obligation in a democratic society, which is educating our kids, and there's no important obligation than that. And we fund it through a regressive property tax. What Vermont has elegantly done is turn that property tax, as much as one can, into a more fair tax based on income. So we all know you have your house and 2 acres. If you make less than $92,000 a year, your school tax is based upon ability to pay on your house and 2 acres. Is that good enough? No. Are property taxes too high? You bet. Have I heard a good proposal to solve that problem? Not yet. We all know that, as a big believer in local control, local school boards and town meetings get together once a year to decide how much to spend on schools. So those are local decisions, and if you choose to spend a lot, you're going to have higher property taxes. If you choose to spend less, you'll have lower property taxes. I've been encouraging, as governor, local communities, local school boards to do a better job of reducing costs, and they've been doing it. We had 3 level-funded budget years over the last 3 years. This year it went up slightly. But they have done a good job of coming to the plate and finally reducing the rising cost of property taxes and education as our school numbers have gone down. So I think our system is working. Could it be better? You bet. Is it painful? You bet. But I think Vermont has the fairest system in the country by ensuring that at least this regressive way that we raise money for education is based upon ability to pay.
What about the first part of my question about wealthier Vermonters, income taxes?
I am a big believer that the federal tax code is flawed, that President Obama is correct, that the wealthiest income taxpayers in America on a federal level have never had a better deal, and they ought to pay their fair share.
How about in Vermont?
In Vermont, I believe we have the most progressive income tax in the nation. I helped write that tax code with Mary Skinner and others over the years to ensure that the wealthiest pay the most. We have a very progressive system where in Vermont is the best kept secret in America. Our wealthiest residents pay a much higher income tax, 8.9% at the top, and middle-class Vermonters pay a lower income tax than our neighbors, New York, Connecticut, Maine, Rhode Island, and many of the other states around us. So I believe that I would always like to see all taxes lower, but I think Vermont's progressive income tax is a good thing.
Our tax system needs reform. When you go to a property taxpayer who says we held our school budget flat and we reduced our spending and we controlled our costs, but my property taxes went up, why? It's very difficult to explain, because whenever you have a tax that uses something like the coefficient of dispersion as part of the calculation, you lose people. People don't understand it. We have a very convoluted tax code, just as the federal government does. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had a Blue Ribbon Tax Commission, a bipartisan tax commission, that looked at the income tax and the sales tax. They were charged at some point in the future with looking at the property tax, and that never got done. That needs to be done. We need to look at all of our major taxes, and we need to reform taxes generally to make them fairer, more understandable, and clearer, and we need to make them work better. Property taxes are too high, income taxes are too high, our sales taxes are too high. For someone such as Governor Shumlin, for example, who lives on the eastern border of the state, who can see New Hampshire from his front window, he knows the effect of high sales taxes on Vermont, and on the fact that if you fly above that border, you see all the development across the river in New Hampshire and none of it in Vermont. We need to stand back and we need to revise our tax code entirely. We need to look at things like property taxes for what was at first a move to allow people with fixed income to stay in their homes and not be priced out of them. It's now morphed into a middle-class tax entitlement. And that says, over and above anything else, that we need to take a look at how these taxes are working one with the other. The fact that we have a progressive income tax, yes, that makes sense. We should have a progressive income tax. The wealthy should pay more, but at the same time, our goal should be to make the pie bigger rather than simply carving it up and redistributing it separately. And that's why my focus on jobs, the economy, unemployment, those are the real issues that we have in this race. So how to make that pie bigger so that there's more tax revenue that would allow us to lower the tax rates of everyone. We also want to make sure, as far as the wealthy is concerned, that we don't price Vermont out of the market. Wealthy people create jobs because wealthy people bring money into our state that can then be used and redistributed and invested. We want that to happen. We don't want to discourage that. And we have to have a balanced tax system to make sure that that's a real possibility.
Thank you both for being here this morning. Senator Brock, Governor Shumlin, thank you. We appreciate your time very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
That's going to wrap up our discussion with the Democratic Republican candidates. Stick around. We will be talking with Independent Emily Hayden. We're going to take a commercial break. We'll be back here live at the Red Wing Cafe and Bakery right after these important announcements.